All for coming tonight. I appreciate it. Senator, good to see you. It is always great to be back here. Good to be in New Hampshire. America's most famous political teenager is here tonight as well. Quinn, welcome back. This guy, let me tell you something. I am making as one of my goals in this race is not only to be the Republican nominee, not only to be elected President of the United States when we beat Joe Biden, but is also to make Quinn the most famous political teenager in America. And we are getting there. Did you hear me mention yesterday? Face the Nation? Oh, okay. Go look. I did. I talked about you yesterday too, Quinn. I'm killing it for you. Your name ID is going to be, as good as Vivek's pretty soon. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate it very much. Mary Pat is with me. Mary Pat, did you say hello to everybody yet? Say hi to everybody. Every time I come up here, someone says to me, why are you running? Or a reporter comes to me, and I see Josh back there from Business Week, who just interviewed me down in another place that I was doing a little business roundtable outside Bedford. And he said to me, I can't find a pollster in America who says you're going to win. And I'm like, great, good. Nice to meet you too. But what I say to everybody is something that's very simple. They asked me why I got into this race. The first reason is because I can't stand by and allow Joe Biden to be president of the United States for a minute past the 4 years he's already got. And look, just think about some of the things that have happened in the last 4 years. Runaway inflation. Everything now is 17% more than it was the day he took the oath of office. And all of us feel it. Wages have gone up 6%. Costs have gone up 17%. And he did it. It was his doing. The runaway spending, and there were Democratic economists like Larry Summers who were telling him at the time, don't do any more spending. It's going to cause inflation. Now, Larry Summers was Secretary of the Treasury under Bill Clinton. This is not a conservative. This is somebody who, even for him, this spending was outrageous. And it was and is. Then, soon after he was elected president, he decided to pull us out of Afghanistan. And when he did it in such an incompetent way that it not only costs over 12.5 of our soldiers their lives, but also left Americans in Afghanistan, which he said he wouldn't leave any behind. He did, still has. And Afghans who had been our allies since 9/11. Left them there too. What do you think the Taliban is doing to those guys and women who were known allies of the United States? And he left them there. And it's really damaged our reputation with other folks around the world, that's the way we treated not only our own people, but folks from another country who stood with us in the war against terrorism after 9/11. He now wants to have all of us repay other people's student loans. Now, as somebody who repaid my own student loans, I have to tell you, that offends me, having repaid my own student loans, and I believe it offends a lot of other Americans who never took student loans, either because they didn't choose to go to college or they went in another direction with their careers. And now we're expected to pay for someone else's student loans. Look, I'm grateful for the student loan program. I would not have been able to go to college or law school without it. My family didn't have the money to pay for me to do it. But I took on that debt, and then I was such a catch that Mary Pat took on the debt with me. It's hard to believe now, looking at me at 60 years old. But back then, when I was 23, an incredible catch. Even coming in with a negative balance sheet, she was willing to, and as a Wall Street person, she knew how to read that balance sheet. And she still hung in there with me. And it took us 10 years to repay those loans. It was our first mortgage. We couldn't get a house until we repaid those loans. But when we did, I remember us repaying those loans and going out and celebrating that we had accomplished something. We owned those 2 degrees of mine, that undergraduate degree and that law degree. We owned them. We had worked for them. And we were grateful to the taxpayers of the United States who gave us the opportunity to do that. But now Joe Biden thinks that we should just pay everybody's loans for them. It's wrong. It's going to add to inflation. But worse yet, it's going to set an awful example for young people who believe that you're entitled to something. We want to give you opportunity. That's what you're entitled to. You're entitled to an opportunity, but not a free one. And now he looks out on another 4 years as somebody who failed us at the most fundamental thing, which is bringing this country together. You remember when he was campaigning, he promised that he was going to bring the country together, that he was going to govern in the middle and bring people together. And instead what he did was run as far to the left as he possibly could on every issue for the left wing of his party. And he's divided the country even further. He's lied to us. And his family is now joining what's becoming a disturbing national trend of being on the grift at our expense. Hunter Biden off, working with foreign governments and selling access to his father. And God knows what involvement Joe Biden had in all of that during some of these times. But I think we're beginning to find out. This is not what being president is supposed to be about. It's not a money-making operation. It's service to your country. And he's doing that too. And the last thing, let me say this. As someone who, I saw a picture earlier today, I don't know if you saw this one at the round table, but a woman who had been with us in 2016 came and showed me a picture of me with her, and I don't know who that young guy was with her. She says it was me, but I'm not completely sure. We're all getting older. It is no shame. It is the natural evolution of life. But, Joe Biden is past his sell-by date. Everybody, you got no business being president of the United States at 80 years old. I'm sorry. If there are 80-year-olds in here, I hope to be you someday. And I hope that what I'm doing then is being a good husband, a good father still, hopefully a good grandfather, and that I'm enjoying my life and doing whatever it is I want to do. But it shouldn't include being president of the United States. And if you watched him last week fall asleep in the Oval Office while the president of Israel was speaking to him, and all the cameras were there, how the hell do you fall asleep then? I mean, look, he's just not up to it. And if he's not up to it at 80, what is he going to be like at 86? Well, guess what? Guess what? He was the guy sitting in that chair, and he was the guy representing our country and falling asleep in front of the president of Israel. And so you are certainly right about the fact that there are people on his staff who are basically doing the day-to-day operations of the White House because he only works a few hours a day. And when he does, we don't know how well he's working. But that is all reasons why I got into this race, because we cannot have him be president again. So some would say, Chris, you voted twice for Donald Trump in 2016 in the general election in 2020. So why don't we just leave it to him to do the job of beating Joe Biden? Well, we left that to him once. And Joe Biden's in the White House. And the fact is that he has only made his situation worse in the time since that election, not better. I watched him a few weeks ago be interviewed by Bret Baier. And Bret Baier said to him, you know, Donald Trump, you lost a lot of suburban women voters in 2020, and that was probably what cost you the election. What are you going to say to them to make them switch their vote back to you in 2024 so you win? Now, I was watching this and thinking, okay, I want to hear this. You know what he said? I won in 2020. I won in 2020. I don't know what you're talking about. Let's make clear. I won in 2020. I didn't lose. If he thinks that's the winning message for 2024, we're going to wind up with an 86-year-old Joe Biden in the White House. So reason number two that I'm running is because we cannot allow Donald Trump to be the Republican nominee again. We simply can't. And the reason we can't is not only because he'll lose to Joe Biden, although that's the first reason, but the second reason is he let us down. Let's be honest about it. I stood on those stages in 2016, in those debates. I participated in them. I was up here in New Hampshire working hard and campaigning. And I remember the things he said. Let's talk about just three of his main promises from 2016. Promise one, I will repeal and replace Obamacare. And we gave him a Republican Congress to do it. Let me tell you, everybody, I was governor of New Jersey for 8 years. I didn't have a Republican legislature for 5 minutes of those 8 years. I would have given my right arm for 1 week, Tom, with you as like Senate president in New Jersey. You would have never slept. We would have been working for that whole week. He had a Republican Congress, and he didn't repeal and replace Obamacare. And you want to know why? In the end, we lost by 1 vote. 1 vote. Whose vote was it? John McCain's. And why didn't John McCain vote that way? Because Donald Trump, from 2015 forward, insulted John McCain every chance he had. Said he wasn't a war hero. Insulted his time when he ran for president. Insulted his service in the Senate. Went to Arizona and said, anybody who's a McCain person can't be with me. His own selfishness and self-centeredness cost us repeal and replacement of Obamacare. So we still have Obamacare today. Second, this is my favorite one. He's going to build the biggest, most beautiful wall you have ever seen from one end of the border to the next, and Mexico's going to pay for it. Well, let's review the performance. He built 52 new miles of wall in 4 years. 52 miles. He says now, reelect me and I'll get it all done. Well, if he goes at the same pace that he went his first 4 years, he only needs 110 more years as president of the United States to finish the entire wall. And if you are waiting for the first peso to be delivered from Mexico, to even pay for the 52 miles that we got, it hadn't come. And I will tell you, back in 2015, I met with the president of Mexico at that time, President Peña Nieto, and I asked him what he thought about the wall. And he said, well, we're not big fans. He said, but it's your side of the border. You can do whatever you want, but let me promise you one thing, Governor. We're never, ever, ever paying for it, ever. And not only has he kept that promise, but so has his successor as well. And so, and he said he's going to fix the immigration system. How does it look? Don't look too fixed to me. But worse than the fact that he didn't achieve it He never even proposed a piece of legislation to fix our broken immigration system. Promise number 3. I am a businessman, and I will balance the budget in 4 years by cutting wasteful Washington spending. In 4 years, he added $6 trillion to the national debt. $6 trillion in 4 years. He ran up more debt in one term than any president in American history, and we shouldn't be surprised. Well, that's right. And I was just going to give you an example of that. I'm going to take you on the road with me all the time. He's teeing me up because, you know, he had businesses in New Jersey when I was governor. He had casinos in Atlantic City, and they went bankrupt 3 times. Now, let me ask you something. How stupid do you have to be to lose money in a casino? The only people who lose money in a casino are us. I remember when the first time I ever went to Atlantic City, my father took me there when Atlantic City was the only other place other than Nevada that had casinos. And I went in to the casino, and I was 18 years old, so I was allowed to play, and I won $50 playing blackjack. I thought I was the hottest thing in the world. And my father said, well, let's go for a walk outside for a little while. We'll take a break. So he took me outside, and we were walking on the boardwalk in Atlantic City. And he said, I want you to see you look at all these big, beautiful hotels? I said, yeah. And he goes, they don't build those because you win. But even with that advantage, Donald Trump had to go bankrupt 3 times. And then I'll give you one story from when I was governor. When I became governor, and hold up Eaton there, okay, Jim, because he's going to fall over on this. I had an $11 billion deficit that I inherited on a $29 billion budget. $11 billion deficit. And when this all came out publicly, and we were having to try to deal with balancing it, my friend Donald Trump called me, this is in 2010, with a suggestion. He said to me, Chris, go bankrupt. I said, no, you don't understand, Donald. States are not allowed to go bankrupt. And he goes, no, I know. Just do it anyway. He said, it'll be tied up in the courts for years. He said, and then everyone will just remember that you fought to not have to pay this money, and whatever the courts figure out, then they figure it out, but you look like a winner. That was his suggestion to me. So should we be surprised that he ran up $6 trillion in debt in 4 years? And what do you think he'll do when he never has to answer to you again? He's got 4 years to do whatever he wants. See, I'm for many of his policies. I remember, I was the first one to endorse him after I dropped out of the race. I chaired his transition. I chaired his opioid and drug abuse commission. This will keep you up at night. I played Hillary Clinton in debate prep in 2016. Oh, yes. You can all make your comments later. And in 2020, I played Joe Biden in debate prep. I took a couple of sedatives before I did, but I did. So I'm not some never Trumper. I am against him because he let us down on the issues that he made us the biggest promises on. If you like Donald Trump's policies, why in the hell would you ever hire him to make sure they happened? He's already proven he can't do it. And if you think next time's going to be easier than last time, I will tell you, no chance, because of all of his other conduct. So I want to be clear that I oppose him for his incompetence. I oppose him for his broken promises before we ever get to any of the criminal indictments. And I want you all to think about that for a second. that we are now casually discussing how many times he will be indicted. Not whether or not. It's never happened in the history of the country before. And he, I suspect, before we get to August 1st, will be facing 4 different criminal indictments. One trial's already been set for May of next year. Think about that. If we nominate him by May of next year, he will not be spending 3 weeks campaigning around the country to defeat Joe Biden. Oh, no. He'll be sitting on bail, our candidate out on bail, in a criminal courtroom, answering for charges of obstruction of justice and possessing national secrets in Mar-a-Lago and Bedminster. We need to all get sober here, okay? This is a road to defeat. Reason number 3 I'm running for president, and then I'm going to take your questions, is because I am tired of this country being small. We have never been small, but we are now. We're arguing about small things. We're letting politicians divide us up into smaller and smaller groups and pitting us against each other. We can't go to cocktail parties or dinner parties anymore because people can't even be civil to each other in discussing public discourse. And not over huge things, over small things. Our country is great because we have always dared and been willing to sacrifice to do the big things. In 1776, if you took a poll, believe you me, independence would not have won. Everybody looked at the size of that British army in Boston Harbor and went, I don't know. We're a bunch of farmers and blacksmiths and folks who don't look like we can beat the British Army. But the men we had leading us at that time, George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, John Hancock, Josiah Bartlett, they were all people who said no. The only way we're ever going to have a country of our own, the only way we're going to really have freedom and liberty is to fight this fight. And they did. And that's the only reason we have a country, everybody. And then in 1860, Abraham Lincoln gets elected president, and the country is literally divided. Not just divided in our opinions, but the southern states leave the Union. And Lincoln could have let that be. Could have said, all right, we'll take the North. The Confederacy be their own country. It'll be fine. No. He said a house divided against itself cannot stand. And he inspired us to make the sacrifices in the Civil War that we needed to make to keep the country together. And how did we end that? We came out bigger, stronger, richer, and freer because we had leaders who thought big, not small. 1941, Franklin Roosevelt could have stayed out of the European war. But he knew that if we didn't fight there, they would come here to fight us. And if he had any doubt about that, the Japanese took care of that at Pearl Harbor. Roosevelt inspired the country to become the arsenal of democracy and to save the world. And America came out of that experience bigger, stronger, richer, and freer. One of the 2 great superpowers in the world with the Soviet Union. And then in 1981, Ronald Reagan took the presidency. And while Jimmy Carter was willing to accept the existence of the Soviet Union and hostages in Iran and Olympic boycotts, Reagan said the Soviet Union is an evil empire, and it belongs to the ash bin of history. And he inspired us to make the sacrifices we needed to make to make that happen. And in 8 short years, the Berlin Wall was down. And 2 years after that, the Soviet Union's flag came down off of the Kremlin, and it was gone. And you had a dozen new free countries in Eastern Europe, and America was the only superpower left. We ended that sacrifice stronger, richer, freer. We are confronted with the same thing today with China. China is the second largest economy in the world, and they want to be first. And they want to dominate the world. And if you think that a communist dictatorship in China is what you want the world to be, then go with the crowd that says we can't be involved in any of this stuff. We need to be concerned about these little things. Forget about that. I'm running for president because I want to do the big things. I want to make sure that we preserve our entitlement programs by fixing them, not by ignoring them. I want to make sure that we give every family a chance at true educational freedom in this country. No one should be consigned to a failing public school. We should not be willing to accept the dropping test scores that we see for our children from kindergarten to senior year in high school, because not only does it make us less competitive with the world, it steals from them their hope. And we're a bigger country than that. And I am not going to believe that America is going to put up with rampant crime in our cities and that we're just going to write off our cities and say, too bad, we don't care. We need a president who's been in law enforcement, who understands that violent criminals belong in jail, and that if the local prosecutors won't do it, then the federal government will, and do it effectively, and restore order to our cities so that the people who live there can raise their families in safety and security and peace. Those are big things. Big things. They're not the little things that you hear the other candidates in this race talking about. That's why I'm in this race. And I don't care what the polls say right now, because I was here 8 years ago. And I remember Jeb Bush in July of 2015 being in first place at 24% and Donald Trump being at 6%. I remember Scott Walker leading in Iowa and then never even appearing on the ballot. From July, he was out of the race at the end of September. Forget the polls, everybody, please. And it's not just because I'm losing. All right? It's not. It's because we should have known by now, and especially all of you in New Hampshire, we suck at predicting this stuff. We just do. How about we do it a different way this time? How about we decide who we want to be president, who should be president, who's ready to lead this country, and then work as hard as we can to make that happen. Now, you know, for people in California or New Jersey who have their primaries in June, well, that's probably not possible, except with their money. But here I sit in the first in the nation primary state. You all don't have that as a theory. You have it as your birthright for living here in New Hampshire. So I don't want to hear any excuses from any of you about polls. If you don't think I'm the best person to be president, then work for somebody else. I'm fine with that. But if you think I'm best, but you don't want to work for me and support me because you think, well, I don't think he can win, then sad on you. Because you're the Americans' best position to make it happen. Because let me tell you something. I will never be in front in one poll in this race until election night. And then when election night happens and I win, all of a sudden you're going to become the smartest people in the world. And the momentum that New Hampshire will give me will make me the Republican nominee. And I will guarantee you, if I am the Republican nominee, Joe Biden doesn't stand a chance to get reelected. And those are the odds that we want in November of 24. So I appreciate you all coming tonight. I'm going to end the soliloquy. And I'm going to use the rest of the time we have together tonight to take questions from all of you. Now, there's some people around with microphones. Catherine, so raise your hands. I will call on you, and they will give you a microphone. You're not going first, dude. I'm already making you famous. You are not going first. This lady right here, Catherine, and there's your microphone.
This is not the first time we met. I met you on June 6th over at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics. You may recall my name is Nancy Ryan, and I serve as New Hampshire's field coordinator for the National Breast Cancer Coalition.
I didn't call on you first by mistake, Nancy.
Oh, bless you. And I left a packet of materials with Doug that evening.
He's not here tonight, but that's okay.
Okay.
I'm ready to answer your question. Your question is, will I sign the breast cancer pledge, right?
That is absolutely
All right.
correct.
So I'm going to give you a Christie answer to that.
Okay.
Which will be very definitive. I only have one problem with the breast cancer pledge. One of the things you asked for in there, now you'll know that I've read it, is that you want me to commit to the expansion of ACA.
No.
Yeah, that's what it says. I read it, Nancy.
Okay, okay.
Right? So my problem with it is I don't like Obamacare. So here's what I'm willing to say to you tonight. I will pledge everything in there except for the expansion of ACA. But I will not commit to expanding Obamacare. So if you're willing to accept that, I'm willing to give it. So you talk to all your friends.
All right.
You see what they're willing to do. I won't, because I could just tell you I'm going to sign it, but that would be not nice.
Okay.
Because I don't intend to expand Obamacare if I become president.
Right.
But everything else that I read in the pledge, I'm for.
That's a wonderful answer. I mean, it shows me that you have indeed taken the time to read it over. I think it opens up a conversation we could have about the ACA and that the broader issue in the public policy platform is access to quality health care for all. If you become president, when you become president,
Nancy's getting smart right here in front of us, isn't she? This is fabulous.
If that turns out to be a different strategy than expanding the ACA, I think I can safely say that we would support you and help you and work with you on that.
Excellent. And let me say this so that you understand not only how I feel about it politically, but personally. My mother was a breast cancer survivor. In 1980, when there wasn't nearly the types of treatments that there are today for that. And she had a very tough time with it, but we were lucky that we didn't lose her. But I know that if she didn't have access to the care that she got, the mammogram that she got that detected the breast cancer, and the surgery and the treatment that she got thereafter, that she wouldn't have lived. So I'm absolutely committed to that, and let's talk about a way we could do it other than Obamacare, and then I'm with you, all right?
All right. I will get back to the National Breast Cancer Coalition, their president, and tell her about our conversation.
You bring her here. We'll talk about it.
She would love to come.
Well,
she
good.
would love to come.
You bring her here, and we'll do it.
All right. Very
all
good.
Right?
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, Quinn, you're second. Go ahead.
Thank you, Governor.
You're welcome, Quinn.
Appreciate the shout-outs.
No problem. We aim to please, Quinn.
Thank you. So I want to preface this by saying you're the most difficult candidate to ask a question to. You are straightforward. You do way too many interviews with the other side's networks. And often, when I have a really good idea to ask you, quite literally the next day, on whatever network you're on, you're answering it. It's annoying. And therefore, this question took multiple podcasts and me reading your book.
All right.
So
there you go.
So on an interview, you said that in 2024, Biden and Trump were the nominees. You would most likely sit that one out. Like it or not, that's a lukewarm vote for Biden. Okay? So, and I also know many other people who have your thinking, so you're not alone there, And a few days ago, I went to a Pence event. I asked him a question if Christians should vote for Donald Trump, given what we know. And he gave me his 3 key values, okay, that he put more than anything else. Number 1 was being a Christian. Number 2 was a conservative. And number 3 was a Republican. So I think the American public is ready for a president to put their country over personal interest and to put their political and religious values over party. Could you do that as a president? Thank you.
Yeah, sure I could. First of all, I want to thank you for finding me annoying. That means you could be one of my children, actually, because they feel exactly the same way. For the very same reason, too, because they come to ask me a question about something, and I answer them back very directly, and they don't like that sometimes. Look, the value that is most important in a president of the United States is the willingness to put your country before your own self-interest. In our lives, it's very difficult for us to ever put something ahead of what we think is best for ourselves, right? You try to do what's best for yourself, and you hope that what's good for you is also good for those around you who count on you, like your family and friends, and the broader society that you live in. But when it comes down to it, I believe if you're president, every day you wake up and you ask yourself what's best for the country, and whether that's good for you politically or personally, has to come behind that. And that's my biggest objection to Donald Trump, is that he's never put the country before himself, ever. And his conduct on January 6th, and this is where I was very disappointed, and I hope when you go see Tim Scott, you're going to ask him, because I like Tim a lot. I think Tim's a good man. I've known him for 10 years, and I don't have a bad thing to say about Tim. I really don't. But he was asked yesterday if Donald Trump is responsible for January 6th. And he said no. Now, look, I'm not saying he's criminally responsible. I don't know. We'll have to see what the indictment is, what it says, and I'll give you my opinion when I see it, whether I think, having done it for 7 years, whether it will stand up in court or it won't. But I think all of us could agree that if Donald Trump invited all those people to Washington on January 6th, in fact, tweeted out and told them, come to Washington, it's going to be wild. That was the invite. It's going to be wild. Then when he got them there, he gave them a speech where he once again repeated the lie that the election had been stolen from him, which is a lie. And then he told them, since you brought up Mike Pence, that Mike Pence could change the whole thing, and if he doesn't, he's letting us all down. When he knew full well that Mike Pence had no ability to change the result of the election by himself. Then he told them, march up to Capitol Hill now, and I'll come with you. Well, let me tell you something, everybody. I've known him for 22 years. If he had the risk of a broken fingernail, he wasn't going on some march to Capitol Hill. And what happened? They left, and he got in the limo and went back behind the gates and the Secret Service at the White House. And then, now I don't know if he knew that they were going to be violent, but he's certainly given them all the reason to be. And then he goes back into the Oval Office, into his little dining room off the Oval Office with his well-done hamburger, eating his lunch, and watching these people desecrate the Capitol of the United States and injure and kill people. And he sat there and did nothing for hours. Tim, explain to me how that doesn't make that person responsible for what happened on January 6th. I'm not saying it means he has to go to jail. I don't know. I'm talking about moral responsibility as the President of the United States. It is disgraceful what he did that day. And it is disappointing that Tim Scott said what he said yesterday for the hope that he could pander some people who currently support Donald Trump and he thinks may leave Donald Trump after all these indictments. And then they'll look at Tim, well, Tim didn't say bad things about Donald Trump, so maybe I'll vote for him. That's wrong. You have a follow-up? Go ahead, stand up.
Comments?
Yeah.
DeSantis a few days ago or yesterday said that January 6th was not an insurrection. Could you tell me some of your thoughts about that?
Well, look, Ron, it's really interesting because I don't know Ron DeSantis all that well. We didn't serve together as governors, so I didn't get to know him all that well. But I got to tell you something. He says something every day that, like, just makes me go, what? Like, he said about his education department changing the African-American studies stuff, right? He said, well, I didn't have anything to do with it, and I don't really know anything about it. Well, boy, oh boy, that's leadership, isn't it? That's real leadership. This is a guy who signed the bill that made them have to go through that process. But now he says, no, I didn't have anything to do with that. And look, I've had a lot of fun with his response to your question about January 6th when he said, well, Quinn asked him the question, and he said, well, I wasn't in Washington that day. Well, none of the rest of us were either, dude. But we all had TV sets, and we watched. And you tell me you have no opinion because you weren't there? Look, I'm not at every Mets game. I'm at some of them. But I know enough to know they stink this year. And I don't have to be there to know it. I can watch it. So I think, look, here's Quinn, you know what's going on here. Here's what they're all trying to do. They're all trying to thread a needle. They want to beat Donald Trump, but they don't want to say anything bad about him. How the hell do you beat someone if you don't explain to people why you're better than he is? Why you deserve your vote more than he does? What he's done that is not up to the office that he's asking for. I don't get it. Don't reward that. Because if you reward that, wait till they actually have power, what they're going to tell you and not tell you. You go to people in New Jersey, any of them that you know, call them and ask them one simple question about me. Not whether they like me or don't like me, voted for me or didn't vote for me. Who cares? Ask them this. Did you ever wonder what he was really thinking? Was there ever a moment when he was governor where you said to yourself, like, geez, I wonder what the governor's thinking. Will he actually answer that question? My problem in New Jersey was that I answered every question. So that meant sometimes my approval ratings were at 75%. And sometimes they were at 20. Because sometimes the answers you give people like, and sometimes you give answers that they don't. But let me tell you what anybody in New Jersey will tell you. We never had to wonder what he was thinking. He always told us. That's what you deserve. And that's the character that you have to be able to put the country first above your own interests. Because there's some questions that you ask that I just don't, sometimes politically, like, oh God, is this the right question to answer? Are we watching Face the Nation? Quinn, sometimes, it's not like I'm dumb. Like there's sometimes questions get asked of you where if I answer this question, I answer it honestly, it's going to hurt me politically. Guess what? You pick this business, that's the way it goes. And what you hope is that you give more answers that help your citizens and help their opinion of you than hurt. And if you do, you get reelected. And if you don't, you don't. But either way, the sun comes up the next morning. Either way, I've won and I've lost. Winning's a lot better. But, I've lost and the sun comes up the next day. Don't put your self-interest there. That's the most important thing. Am I a Christian? Yes. I was raised a Roman Catholic. and I believe strongly in the principles that underlie my faith. But they are not, as president, more important than what I believe are in the best interests of the people of our country. They're not. They help inform the way I make those judgments, but they don't come before them. And nor does my party come before my country. What I hope to do is to lead my party in a way that our values are good for everyone in the country, even if they don't agree with them, that they'll still benefit them. So, yes, sir.
Hi, it's a little loud. Hi, I'm David from Bradford. It's a little town north of us near Mount Sunapee. I want to follow up on kind of what you've just been talking about doing what's best for the country, and talk about government in a little bit broader sense, I guess. And no offense to anybody that's here, but it seems like most people in Congress are more interested in being reelected than doing what's right for the government. Most decisions, most votes that have to do with anything of importance is really just straight down the party line. I'm either Democrat, I'm for it, or Republican, I'm against it. Seems to me that the solution to this, and I may be wrong, but would be term limits. So that, hey, I'm not going to be elected next year. I don't care. I'm going to do what's right for the country. But what do we have to do to get Congress to start following that agenda that you were just talking about?
Well, I'm totally for term limits. And the reason I am is because I've been subjected to them. New Jersey allows 2 terms for the governor. That's it. So you get 8 years, and you know that's the most you're going to get. And so do the best you can in those 8 years, and then it's over. I don't know why that should apply to me and not apply to the legislature. You know, I mean, like, look, it probably should be a little longer with the legislature. I'd say probably 12 years. In Congress, I'd say 12 years. That's 6 terms in the House, 2 terms in the Senate. If you didn't get it done by then, guess what? You ain't getting it done. We have a guy in New Jersey now who this year is his 50th year in the state legislature. 50 years in the state legislature. I feel like going, and I did this to him when I was governor, which is why he doesn't like me. But I used to say to him, like, go home. Go home, enough. The problem is that the very people who term limits would apply to are the ones who get to vote for whether term limits exist or not. And so you're asking them to make themselves obsolete. It is one of the failures of our system. Our system is not perfect. It's the best imperfect system in the world, but it is not perfect. And so I share your frustration because, you know, what happens a lot of times with a legislature or a Congress is that they look at the governor at some point and they go, okay, you got 2 years left or 3 years left. We're waiting you out. We're just going to wait you out. You're going to be gone. In each state, that moment's a little bit different with term limits. You know, when's the moment when it clicks over to where you go from being a really powerful force to somebody who's kind of like with a tin cup and pencils begging for a vote from the legislature? But it happens. The legislature should not, nor should Congress, be there forever. No one is indispensable in this democracy. George Washington left after 8 years, for God's sake, right? I would think that he may have been the only indispensable man in this country from a governmental perspective. He left after 2 terms voluntarily. He was trying to set an example for the rest of the country. He did, with the exception of FDR, for every president after him, and now it's the law. But notice, Congress is happy to make a law to restrict the president. Not so happy to themselves. So I would be for it. I would sign it in 15 seconds. I mean, they'd be walking the thing in. I'd be running outside to get it, to sign it. But I also want to be honest with you. Like, I just don't know if they'll ever do it. There has to be a constitutional convention. And you know, once that happens, Katie, bar the door, man. God knows what people will do at a constitutional convention. So we got to be careful about that for just one solo issue. But so I wouldn't favor that. I think that the only way it ultimately happens is if we just start imposing term limits on people through the ballot box. And that's part of our problem, too. It's our fault, right? Like, everybody hates Congress, but votes for their congressman. Like, Congress sucks, except for my guy. he's really good, and I'm going to vote for him. But the other 434 really, really stink. And I wish you people would kick those people out so that my guy's good, but the rest of them are terrible, right? So we've got to get over that piece of it. And I think, part of what a president could do is to talk about that. And presidents just generally don't talk about it because you're also trying to make deals with those same people, right? So you're like, so you got to find the balance to that. The guy who I told to go home, we never really were the same. So you got to be careful. You got to be careful about that when you're the governor. But he also, by the way, a quick story. He's the acting governor at one point too, because he was the Senate president, and we didn't have lieutenant governors back then. So the Senate president became governor when Governor McGreevey in my state had to resign, and so he was acting governor for a couple of years, and so he never got elected though. But while he was there, he passed a bill saying if you serve as an acting governor for more than 6 months, you get the title governor and you get a portrait. So when I became governor, and he wants everybody to call him governor, even though he's still in the state Senate. So when I became governor, I wouldn't call him governor. I'd see him, I'd go, Senator, how are you? Good to see you. And shoulders for summer. Finally, one day in the hallway of the State House, I'm walking one way, he's walking the other, and he says, good morning, Governor. I said, good morning, Senator. And he goes, can you just stop for a second? He said, why will you not call me governor? There's a law that you're supposed to call me governor. I go, yeah, a law that you passed and signed. You posted it in the Senate, you voted for it, then you ran down the hall as governor and signed it. Like, I would love to be able to do that too, but I can't. And he said, no, I want you to explain to me why you won't do it. I said, because you didn't get elected. For those of us who ran statewide and went through the trouble, I think you should have to go through that to be called governor. And he's not a dumb guy, Tom. So he says, oh, really? Well, if Gerald Ford walked in here right now, what would you call him? That's pretty good, right? Like, what would I call Gerald Ford, right? He got appointed vice president, and then he wound up becoming president when Nixon resigned. So you got to be quick, though, in this game. So I looked at him, I said, you want to know what I'd call him? And he said, yeah. I said, I'd call him a miracle because he's been dead for 11 years. So I never quite had to answer that question. All right. Yes, ma'am, in the red shirt.
So I'm not going to call you governor. I'm going to call you President Christie.
Well, thank you.
So let's start with that. I also
right.
will not be as famous as Quinn because
No one is, by the way.
I am past my sell-by date as well. But I hope that you remember me from Derry, New Hampshire. And this might remind you that this is the woman who lives in Maine, who's a Democrat, who finds you intriguing. Ring a bell? There you go.
I remember you.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you.
Nice to see you again. Foster care. Thank
Right.
you. Thank you.
Way to
Guess
go,
what I'm going to
Keisha.
ask
Attaboy.
about? So, when you're doing your stuff around, you might want to mention me. I don't
All right,
know.
I will.
was just saying.
See,
So,
Quinn, everybody's jealous
Quinn,
now.
I'm running for you. I'm running
Everybody's
for you.
everybody's
I'm-
jealous of you, Quinn.
I'm running for you. So, I'm going to ask about foster care again.
All right.
And I'd like to know what you do as president to ensure that the states are doing a good job. Because there's some states out there that are running a little rogue. And foster care is near and dear to my heart. And I think we need some major reform.
Well, I think there's two ways to do it. One way is to make sure that there are performance standards attached to the federal money that goes to the states in foster care, and that there are performance standards that they have to meet to be able to do that. And I don't think that's really much to ask when the hundreds of millions of dollars that we send to all the states every year on foster care for the federal government. And then the second thing is to say to my Attorney General that this is one of the areas that I want the Justice Department to focus on inside the states in conjunction with the Department of Health and Human Services, that you should work together to make sure that the states that are not performing, that if we have to step in and put them under a consent decree, that we do that to make sure that those children are not being abused, that those children are not being neglected while they're in the care of the state. And so I think those are the two best ways to do it: performance standards for everybody, and then second, enforcement by the Department of Justice and the Department of Health and Human Services to make sure that we step in when there are examples of neglect that the state has been unwilling to fix. And I saw it happen in my state well before I ever became governor. Our department of, it was called Youth and Family Services, that oversaw foster care, was under a federal consent decree for a number of years because they were not doing the job the right way, and children were being abused and neglected. And I will tell you, it got everybody's attention, and then they fixed it. So if we have to do that and be aggressive that way, I think we have an obligation to those kids to do that, because if we take them and say we're going to care for them until they can find a permanent home, then we have an obligation to make sure we do it the right way. Thanks. All right, let me see. All right, the blue shirt in the back. There we go. You got one to your left. One to your right. There you go.
You took a hit for the bridge incident, but I think time has passed and America is ready for an honest, direct approach that you would bring. My question to you is, why do you think you're ready now? And what would you expect in the primary? I appreciate your delineating why you oppose Trump. So interested in what your thoughts are, why you're right now, and what you would ultimately see if you were to progress through that gauntlet and face the Democrats.
Well, first thing is that, this has been going on for me for a while. I had people who travel from all over the country in 2010 and 2011 to try to urge me to get into the race against Mitt Romney. And I said at the time, I didn't feel ready to be president. I was 47, 48 years old, and I just had been governor for a year to a year and a half when the people had come to see me. I just didn't feel like I was ready. I now, after Barack Obama and Donald Trump, that seems to be a quaint idea about not being ready, but that's really the way I felt. And where I am now as compared to 2016, to 8 years ago, is I'm just smarter and more mature and a better person. I just am. I wasn't a bad person back then, but I'm better now. And I'm smarter than I was then. And I think the reason I am is because in the 5 years since I've left office, I've taken time to get smarter, to read about things that I didn't have time to read about before because I was governor and really totally consumed with that job. And in the 7 years before that, completely consumed by the job of U.S. Attorney. Now, I learned things in both of those jobs that helped me to be a good president, too. But I've had time to focus and think about things differently than when I was in the midst of every day, the hustle and bustle of running in a state of 9 million people. And I think that losing makes you better. When you win, everybody tells you how smart you are. Oh, we knew it all along. Oh, God, you were a great candidate. Oh, that campaign was flawless. It's flawless. Oh, when you got reelected, oh, God, you were a great governor, and that's why you got reelected. And your reelection campaign was flawless. You don't really learn much from winning. You learn a couple of things from losing. One, you really have time to critically look back at what you did well and what you did not so well. Second, the reason you have that time is because the phone stops ringing. Losers don't get phone calls. Winners do. And so you have time to really look back on that stuff. And third, I think there's a humility that comes with losing. And that humility is really important when you govern. Because everyone's going to be telling you, if you're president, that you're the most powerful person in the world. And if you actually start to believe that, you become a very dangerous person. What you need to believe, I think, is that you have the power as president to change the world. And the question is, how will you use it? Not that you are the most powerful person. You are a temporary steward of that power and authority. It's not something you own. It's something that's bestowed on you by the people that you serve. And I think after you lose, you understand that even better. So I think those are the ways that I'm different and better now. And as for what do I expect from the Democrats, I expect what we always get. They'll call me mean, heartless, uncaring. They'll say I was an awful governor. And they'll say I'll be an even worse president. But then I'll be standing next to old Joe Biden. And remember, I explained this to Prime Minister Cameron from Great Britain. I went over there on a trade mission back in 2015, and he was just getting ready to run for re-election. And you know, the British elections are so civilized. It's 48 days. That's it. No commercials before, no commercials after, no campaigning. It's 48 days. And he was saying to me, I don't know how the hell you guys do it. You're campaigning for a year and a half, 2 years to become president. Like, I could never do that. In fact, I don't understand your whole system. I really don't. Can you explain it to me? And I said, well, there are lots of different things I can explain, but remember this, Prime Minister. In America, most of the time, we don't get to vote for who we want to vote for. We get to vote for who's left. If it's me and Joe Biden, we're going to be the two who are left. And I have supreme confidence that no matter what garbage they throw at me, and in part because of some of the stuff you referenced, I've had some awful garbage thrown at me over time that turned out to be completely false. But I had to live with it, and I had to deal with it. And you have to learn how to have broad shoulders and not allow it to make you become bitter and angry. And I think you could see I'm neither bitter nor angry. I'm a happy guy. And if you elect me president, I'll be really happy. And if you don't, I'll still be happy. Because, look, I'm a kid who was born to a mom who didn't go to college, to a dad who served in the Korean War, came home, his father had passed away, and he worked at the Breyers ice cream plant in Newark, New Jersey. And finally, one day, a guy standing next to him who was much older said, "You're too smart to be working here. Why don't you go to college?" And my father said, "Well, I don't have the money to go to college. My dad died. We have no money." And he goes, "Man, you just came out of the Army. You have the GI Bill." My father had no idea. And it was because of this guy standing next to him at the assembly line at the Breyers ice cream plant that my father went to Rutgers at night. And it took him 6 years to graduate, but he became a CPA, and it changed our family's life. I'm not the guy who you saw in kindergarten and went, "Oh yeah, he's going to run for president someday." So I'm going to be happy no matter what. And I think that the problem with some of these other candidates, Trump and DeSantis in particular, is they're really angry. And I don't think you want an angry president. Now, you've seen me. I'm as tough as anybody. And I'm willing to fight, and I will fight anybody for a cause that I believe in. But my desire to fight is not driven out of anger. My desire to fight is driven out of what I believe in my heart is right. You know, my mother taught me from the time I was a little kid. She used to say this to me all the time, "Christopher, be yourself, because then you don't have to worry about remembering who you pretended to be yesterday." So you're going to see me exactly the way I am, but I'm better now than I was 8 years ago. I'm certainly better than I was 15 years ago when I became governor. And it's all those experiences that have made me better. And maybe it's time that we have somebody who's willing to admit that they're flawed and that they've learned from failure. Not that they always win, even when they don't. And someone who's not angry. I'm not angry at anybody. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I'm getting to run for president of the United States twice. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Jane Messane. I'm from Kingston. A little bit about my background. I'm a retired school counselor, and we moved from Ohio. I'm pretty much like a couple people in this room. David, what you said before is a big issue that I have as well. And also, you had mentioned you were a Democrat back here. Okay. I knew the minute Trump ran, okay, that I could no longer call myself a Republican. And based on the fact that I thought he had very much of the traits, and I can't diagnose here on the floor, the traits of a personality disorder, a narcissistic one, and I think people should just outline that more clearly and show the piece-by-piece identity of what he has done to our country. I said to my husband, I said, I can't vote for a man like that. Okay, there is no way, okay, based on character, right? The other thing is, I'm solution oriented. I'm always trying to solve a problem. We talk about the Senate and House. And when I have time now because I'm retired. I watch everything on TV, okay? I'm here because I want to thank you for speaking the truth. And as I said at home, he's got big balls, okay, to be able to, okay? I said he's got big balls to stand up against a narcissist. Because what Donald Trump has done is he has taken control of all the Republican Party. And my question to you is, how will that be changed when you're there? And how will we not say, oh, well, the Democrats may not like you, but what will you do to have them get to like you? And then the next thing that I wanted to say was that when I watch these meetings, you know, when the legislator meetings and things like that, as an educator, when you have those clickers, no one should know what your vote is because people are so brainless there that they all vote with one another, okay? And if you had a clicker, okay, and I don't mean that not everybody because I know many people. I said right away you were a politician, okay? All right away. All right. But you look like a nice man, too. All right. Yeah, right. But they should have silent clickers, and people should sit. We ought to automatically create division by having Republicans and Democrats. They should sit alphabetically and have an assigned seat and get who you get. So my question to you is, how will you bring it together more? Because I am sick of the division, I'm sick of the anger, and I'm here because of you. And I want to know how you're going to change everybody else. Okay.
Now, you said you're from Ohio, right?
I was.
Right, okay. The big balls thing makes me think you're from Jersey, but okay. I know. Right, well, I'm going to take your word for you from Ohio. The best way I can describe it to you is to describe my experience as governor. Because remember now, I got elected in New Jersey, which hasn't voted for a Republican for president since George Bush 41 in 1988. We have the longest streak of not electing a Republican to the United States Senate. The last time we elected a Republican to the United States Senate was 1972. It's now 51 years. 750,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans. And so it's a blue state. And I get elected as a pro-life, conservative former prosecutor, as governor. What that tells you, first off, is, man, was the state in bad shape, right? They were like, all right, it's so bad, we got to go with him. How bad could he be? Let's give him a shot. But when I get there, I realize, look, I can't do anything without the legislature. I can do some executive order stuff. It's a powerful governorship. It's constitutionally the most powerful governorship in the country. But still, the big things that I was interested in doing, you needed the legislature. So during the transition, you know, as soon as you get elected in New Jersey, you're a target, so you get police protection the minute you get elected. And I mean the minute. Like, they announced the race that I won. I walked out of my hotel room to go down to see the lieutenant governor-elect, and there were 3 troopers outside the door who weren't there when I walked in that night. So I say to the troopers one day, I said, look, take me down to see the new Senate president. Now, the new Senate president was a Democrat named Steve Sweeney, who was the president of the Iron Workers Local. So another shy and retiring guy from organized labor with me. His office was 2-hour drive away from where I live. So they said, well, do you have an appointment? I said, don't worry about it, guys. Just let's get in the car and let's go. So I showed up at his office unannounced. And his secretary was completely flummoxed. I walked in. She said, Governor-elect, do you have an appointment? I said, no. I was just in the neighborhood. I thought I'd stop by and say hello. And she's like, well, let me see if he can see you. So poor Steve came out. He had just got back from the gym. He wasn't expecting anybody. He's sweatpants and a T-shirt and sneakers. And it's like, Governor-elect, what are you doing here? And I said, I wanted to talk to you. I was in the neighborhood. He goes, bull. He goes, yeah, your neighborhood's 2 hours away. What are you talking about? I said, we need to talk. And we went into his conference room, just the two of us. And I said, Steve, look, we got a choice here. I said, we can either yell and scream at each other and make headlines for 8 years. And he said, 4 years. And I said, no, 8 years. I said, or we could put touchdowns in the end zone. And here's what I'll tell you. If you're willing to work with me to put touchdowns in the end zone, I will never break my word to you. If I give you my word, even if it turns out to be a bad deal for me, I'm going to stick with it because what I want to do is spend 8 years getting things done. So what do you want to do? And he sat there for a second, and he stood up and he put his hand out. He said, let's put touchdowns in the end zone. And I shook his hand, and if you go back to Steve Sweeney now, he's out of the state Senate now. But if you went back to him now, he would tell you that I never broke my word to him in 8 years, nor did he break his word to me. This business is still about people, and it is still about people interacting with each other. And one of the best pieces of political advice I ever got was someone who told me, remember, Chris, it's harder to hate up close. And we do not spend enough time with each other anymore. We do not spend time with people we disagree with. We don't spend time with people we don't like. And guess what? They all got elected too. Maybe by a fewer number of people, but they still all got elected. They have a right to be there. So, but it's hard. It's hard. I did spend a lot of time, dinners, lunches, out for drinks, carnivals, fairs, with people I couldn't stand. That really I found like not nice. But, you know, one of them was chairman of one committee or chairman of another committee that I needed to work with. So I spent time with them. I got to know their families. I listened to them. I got to know what they cared about, what was most important to them. I'd invite them to the governor's mansion. I'd invite them to the office. I'd sit and just talk with them. I called every legislator. Now, I couldn't do this in New Hampshire because there's too damn many of you, but we had 120 in New Jersey. I called every legislator every year on their birthday. And it became like a joke after a while, but they couldn't wait. Like all of a sudden it was their birthday, and if I didn't, I usually would make the calls on my way to the State House in the morning. But if I was busy doing something else, I might not get to it till the afternoon. And I remember calling one state assemblywoman one time who has the same birthday as Mary Pat. And I called her at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She goes, oh my God, I thought you forgot me this year. And I said, no, heaven no. I just was a little busy this morning. My point is there is no magic to this. The magic is who you are and what you are. And if you're willing to sacrifice some of that to get things done. And so the way I would do it as president on a bigger scale is the same way I did it as governor, which is I know I'm not just going to talk to the Republicans. I'm going to talk to the Democrats too. I'm not just going to listen to the Republicans. I'm going to listen to the Democrats too. I recognize that I'm going to disagree with them more than I'm going to disagree with the folks on my side from a philosophical perspective. But what I also recognize is you need 60 votes in the United States Senate to get anything done. So unless you're going to have 60, and the only president in recent times who had it was Barack Obama, and he frittered it away, you're probably no one's going to have 60. So you got to get people on the other side to come along with you. I don't think compromise is a dirty word. In our politics over the last 20 years, compromise has become a dirty word. And so it doesn't mean that like I'll totally sell myself out for something that I absolutely don't believe in. But Ronald Reagan used to say, you know, the guy who disagrees with me 20% of the time is not my 20% enemy. He's my 80% friend. It's about the way you think about this. And that's why I think getting a conservative governor from a blue state is the way to do this. That's what Reagan was. And Reagan understood that he'd push and push and push. And when he felt like he had gotten the best deal he possibly could, he took it. And what you know when you're governor or president is, you always get the credit anyway. Like some bill passes and Eaton sponsors it in the state Senate, and he works hard and he does all the research on it, and then he gets it passed, and then he gets it passed through the House, and it comes to the governor's desk, and then the governor's going to sign it, and they all show up at a bill signing, and Eaton's standing behind there, and the only thing he gets, if he's lucky, is a pen, right? The governor turns around and gives him one of the pens, right? And the headline says, you know, in this state, Sununu enacts whatever. Eaton is on the jump page, right? His family's got to go to the jump page to find out the bill was sponsored by Eaton, right? So if you're governor or you're president, be smart about this. Give out as much credit as you can give, because in the end, every success comes to you if you're in that job. Every failure comes too, but that's the game you play, and that's what you're in this business. So to me, that's what we got to get back to as a practical matter. And if we do that, we got a shot. But you also have a responsibility too. And what I'd say to the voters is, you get who you deserve. So you vote for one of these angry characters, and then you're upset because we're angry and divided, well, sad on you, because you've had notice. They're not pretending to be anything other than what they are. Trump's not pretending to be anything. He sent out a post the other day that said, if you F with us, and he used the entire word, if you F with us, we will come back and deliver to you something that you never, ever could have imagined. Well, geez, man, you vote for somebody like that, what the heck do you think's going to happen? And the same way with angry Ron DeSantis. Man, I never see him when he's happy. I mean, this guy, he's got a beautiful wife. He's got 3 beautiful children. He's like the governor of the 3rd largest state in the country. Won re-election with 60% of the vote. How about smiling every once in a while? How about every once in a while, like saying something nice about somebody? I mean, I don't want to give him political advice, but for God's sake, I mean, you know, so, but if you vote for people like that, that's what you're going to get. They're not getting better when they get power. They only get worse. Yes, sir.
Welcome back. Since 2014, 15, and 16, here in New Hampshire, we've been asking the candidates about Social Security, how they were going to strengthen it, get rid of it, do whatever. We're now up to 2023, and the current president says he's not going to touch it. The past president said he's not going to touch it, and they mean it. They're not going to do anything. As far as the new labels that's out there, says it's got to be fixed, but they don't have any ideas. Can you give us some hope?
Yeah. First off, remember, all these people say they're going to do nothing. Say that because it's going broke in 11 years, and none of them will be in office in 11 years. So they know when it goes broke and they don't do anything, someone else is going to get blamed. That's the first thing. That's the political practicality of it. I've been saying this since I got in the race, and I talked about this 8 years ago when it was 19 years away from insolvency, not 11. There are 3 things that drive the solvency of Social Security, right? There's the retirement age, there's the amount of the benefits, and there's who else receives them. That's it. So that means to me, we've got to consider retirement age, and we've got to consider means testing for who gets it. Now, I'm not talking about changing the retirement age for people who are in their 50s or 60s. You can't do that. There's not enough time for you to prepare. You're counting on the fact that Social Security is going to be a certain amount, and that's part of what you're going to use to support yourself in retirement. But, you know, we have a son who's turning 30 in August. If I change the retirement age for people in their 30s and 40s, they got plenty of time to be able to figure out how to adjust. So if you can't retire at the current age of 67 and it's higher, well, then you're going to adjust. But that will make a huge difference in the solvency of it, because the other thing we got to remember, and the reason why it's fair to do that, is the average age now of you know, when people pass is in the low 80s for men and the mid 80s for women. When Social Security was passed, life expectancy was 63, and you got to get Social Security when you were 65. What a great deal for the government. The average person would pay into it their whole lives and die before they ever collected a nickel. That's a government program, right? FDR was genius. He didn't think we'd all wind up living until our 80s. And by the way, when our son gets to be near retirement age, the age expectancy is probably going to be in the early 90s with the way medical science is getting better and better at helping us to elongate our lives. So raising the retirement age is fair as long as you do it for only the people who have time to prepare for it. And on means testing, look, I don't have a number in my head, but let's start off at the most ridiculous. Do Warren Buffett and Mark Zuckerberg really need to collect a Social Security check? I mean, like, look, This country, they've been wildly successful. Yes, they paid into the system the whole time. I remember being in New Hampshire 8 years ago, and I had some guy yell at me, I don't care how much money I have. I paid in, I want my money out. I'm like, well, God bless America. I mean, this country, the guy was saying to me, I've done great. I've made lots of money. I'm like, well, why do you think that's true? Because you live in the freest, strongest country in the world. How about you contribute something more to that? And so that's why I think means testing is important. I don't favor raising taxes on it because, quite frankly, then I think you're defeating the purpose of the age increase in eligibility, because you want to give as much money to the younger people as they can to help for them to plan for their own retirement. So if you take that money out and higher taxes and then tell them, and you have to wait, that's a double whammy that's not fair to them either. So I think that's the way we have to do it. And I am the only candidate in this race who's willing to say that. The most disgusting moment of Joe Biden's State of the Union address was when he said, let's all agree we're not going to touch Social Security. And both Republicans and Democrats and the speaker got up and cheered. I mean, what cowards? What cowards? And it's wrong. So I'm the only person in this race who will look you in the eye and say, I will strengthen Social Security in order to save it. And that's going to mean some sacrifices from people. Guess what? That's the way this country always moves forward, is that people are willing to sacrifice for the good of the country. Because if we don't do it, in 11 short years, and it'll happen like that, because I know you've missed me the last 8 years, but it has been 8 years already since I've been up here regularly. That time went pretty quickly. Everyone gets an automatic 25% cut in benefits. Now, for the people who depend on Social Security to pay their rent, to buy food, losing 25% is going to be enormous, and we can't have that happen. So Trump will say he's not going to do anything to it, and through some magic of his great business acumen, he's going to fix it. Biden's just going to say he's going to raise taxes on everybody, and that's the way he's going to fix it. But none of them will tell you the truth, which is there's a way to do this, but you got to have some of what she said. I'm not going to use that word again. My wife's going to hit me. But you got to be willing to do that. And guess what? There are going to be some people who aren't going to like you because of it. And guess what? Your popularity numbers will probably go down for a while. But if you became president because you want to frame your popularity numbers after you leave, I'd suggest to you that you didn't run for the right reasons. So, you have something else? You're still standing. Let me tell you something. Your mom's 100? Good. I'll pay her. At this point, I'm worth paying her. Yes. You'll go last. Yes.
Thanks, Governor Christie.
Thank you.
I know you did a lot to help out New Jersey after Hurricane Sandy. That was deemed a 100-year storm. Over the last couple of years, that calculus is starting to change with the intensification of storms, heats, floods, wildfires. I know you're not a fan of government stepping in on too many toes, but what kind of role do you see or groups of public and private could play in dealing with this new set of challenges?
Well, let's start off with the fact that I think climate change is real, and I think that human behavior contributes to it. And I think anybody who doesn't believe that is just not watching. Okay? It's just true. I mean, now, the question is, how do you fix it? And I'll give you an example. The U.S. over the last decade has done a lot to lower our carbon output. In fact, we're putting 1 billion tons of carbon less into the atmosphere per year today than we did 10 years ago. You know what the Chinese are doing? 5 billion more tons a year. So part of the reason why all of America won't embrace trying to come up with a solution is because they think we're getting screwed. And Americans don't like that. They don't like that feeling. So I think the first thing we need to do is, as we reset our relationship with the Chinese, one of the things on the list has to be, all right, enough already. Don't tell me you're still going through your industrial revolution, all right? You've had yours. It's been 50 years now that you've been building up your economy. You're now the second largest economy in the world. You have to be a player in this. And if you're not, there's going to be ramifications for it. And they have to be economic ramifications that we place upon them for not being part of the solution. Because I can't unilaterally disarm the United States of America, and I won't. I won't make us less competitive economically from an industrial perspective, because in the end, it's not getting better. Net, it's getting worse. So that's the first thing. Second, look, I'm for an all-of-the-above energy solution, meaning I'm for any of the things that work, right? So yes, I'm for oil and natural gas. Yes, I'm fine with wind as long as it works. Solar, when I was governor, we were the second largest solar producing state in the country, only behind Arizona. I'm fine with it. But give you another example. New Jersey, the most densely populated state in America, 53% of our electricity in New Jersey is supplied by nuclear. This is a whole new nuclear age now. It's not 3 Mile Island. It's much, much safer. And we know how to do it, and it doesn't add anything to our carbon load. And if we can do it in the most densely populated state in the country safely, North Dakota should be able to handle it, you know? It should be okay. So that's what I mean by all of the above. I have no objection to electric vehicles, but don't tell me I have to buy one now. And don't tell me, as my governor is now telling us, no gas-powered vehicles will be sold in New Jersey after 2035. Oh, really? And he also says, no more, he's another one of these no-gas stoves guys, right? Like, you come to my house and cook with the electric stove, man. And by the way, the false part of that is, what generates the electricity, everybody? Hey, right? Natural gas or coal or oil. Like, as if by making it electric, somehow it makes it clean. No, it doesn't. Like, it's all foolish. So I think that part of the problem is that the Democrats in the main on this issue put forward foolish stuff like that discredits the entire concept. So I'm for all in. I'm for all of the above. Let's do everything. Let's produce as much oil and natural gas as we can so that we can become self-sufficient and an exporter. Let's develop wind and solar to the full extent that we can so it takes some of the load off of that and we can lower the use of oil and natural gas. Let's use nuclear, for God's sake. It's safe and clean, and it's certainly much safer than it was 50 years ago. So we should do all those things, because if we do, we'll lower it even more. And by the way, you know, I see lots of Teslas on the road. Lots of people are buying them. Now, part of it's because of the government incentives that they get to buy it. But I think even when those go away, people still keep buying them because they like them and think they're kind of cool. I'm fine with that. But I love the fact that, like in California, he says, I think it's 2025 in California, like a number, only a few years away, that he wants to start to phase out gas cars. But then he put out an alert earlier in the summer to people with their electric cars, don't charge them because you'll kill the grid. Well, come on, man. What am I supposed to do? Take my bike to work? Which is probably in California what they'd like you to do. So that's the way I view it. I think it has to be an element of our foreign policy with the Chinese. And domestically, we have to say to people, for those who believe that we should be more aggressive, great. I'm fine. Let's try to build on what we have already for alternative energies. But in the meantime, the deal you have to make with me is you can't tell me I can't use oil and gas and nuclear. You let me use oil and gas and nuclear, I'll invest in solar and wind. But you got to give me both, because I can't disarm this country, because it will cost us jobs and it will cost our economy significantly. We can't do that. So that's the way I would handle it. All the way in the back.
How you doing?
Good.
So I'm from Yonkers, New York, and
All
my
right.
dad's even here in the audience. So we're listening to talk, and we're like, we understand. So my husband is the commander of this VFW. I've been helping veterans for a long time. I really appreciate them. That's why you're here today, right? The VFW.
Yep.
So he just wants to ask you, and he's a little shy about the PACT Act. Like, hey, you did the, yeah, we got each other. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to hand it off to Mason, all right?
All right.
So give me one
Okay.
second. Walking over.
Now, let me just tell you something.
Oh, he hates this. What?
This is, I want everyone to know, in case you're not really familiar with this, This is what a wife from New York or New Jersey does.
There you go. There you go. Dad, look, that's my dad back there,
There you go.
Tony. Say hi to Tony.
Tony, how are you?
All
Good to see you.
right, here you go.
Mason.
All right, so it's kind of a twofold question.
Okay.
First, I'd like to know what your opinion of the PACT Act is that they recently passed.
It's not an easy question, right?
Just your opinion.
Yeah, no, I know. But my opinion's not easy on this one. Look, I always get a little bit concerned about the way they kind of meddle in that stuff a little bit. I think sometimes they think they have the solutions to everything and they don't. And I'm a little concerned that that may be a little bit too much meddling for my taste. But am I like vehemently opposed to it? No. But would it have been the way I would have approached it? Probably not.
So my second part to that is, so if you are elected, what is your plan? I don't want a canned political answer. I want to know what you're going to do for my generation of veterans who are suffering from gastrointestinal issues, all these things that the VA is not currently giving us ratings for, and that's what the PACT Act was a step forward to. What are you actually going to do to help my generation of veterans?
Look, I think that the single most important thing we can do is to give veterans the ability to go whatever doctor they want to go to. Okay, look, the VA system is a good idea and it is a good baseline of care. But it is not widely available enough, both from a geographic issue and from the level of expertise they have in certain areas, for people to be able to get all the care that they need. So it seems to me that if you have served this country and you are honorably discharged from that service, that you should be able to have a card, like any other insurance card, that allows a veteran to go to the VA if they want, or to another doctor that maybe provides a better expertise or is more geographically convenient to you, or provides a service that the VA simply doesn't provide at all or well. And I don't understand why we have all this discussion about Obamacare and we didn't first take care of the people who protected and served this country. I'm not one of those folks, and that's why PACT Act makes me a little bit nervous. I'm not one of these folks that believes the VA can be fixed to the level that would give you the type of care that you deserve. And so for me to come up here and say, I'm going to make the VA better, well, I would like to try to make the VA better, but that doesn't solve your problem in my view. To me, what solves your problem is you being able to have freedom of choice to go to the doctor you want. And if you have fought and served this country, that is the least that we owe you. And that's the way I would deal with it. And I think Donald Trump, to give him some credit, made some steps towards that. But again, as normal with him, he didn't get it done. He talked about it a lot, but never got it finished. I think that's something that really could bring Republicans and Democrats together. I think that's an issue where Republicans and Democrats could both agree that veterans deserve that level of care and, as you mentioned, access to care, which a lot of veterans don't have, either because of their geography or because of the lack of expertise at the VA for that, or the enormous waiting list that exists to be able to get it, even if they have it. And you shouldn't have to wait to get deathly ill before you get taken care of. And so, to me, that's the way I would do it. And I think that given what we spend on health care in this country already, adding our veterans to that availability is not going to be the thing that breaks this budget. We got a lot of other problems than this. And by the way, there's a lot of things we spend money on for that we got absolutely nothing in return for it. What we got in return from you and the men and women who served with you was loyal, faithful, selfless service. And in return, we should make sure that whether it's a health issue that arose as part of your service or just arose because you're a human being and you get sick, you should be taken care of. And that's the way I would deal with it.
Thank you.
I know, it's 6:30. Pardon me? I'll get you. I'm making my way around. I'm trying to get to everybody.
Hi, Governor. Do you think women should have the right to make medical decisions for themselves?
Which medical decisions are you talking about? Is this like our code word for abortion, or is it?
I think any medical decision, including abortion, but yes,
Well,
any medical decision.
Look, let's divide the two, because I think the two are divisible. And the reason I think the two are divisible is because with almost every other medical decision that's made, you are not violating something in our Constitution. Our Constitution says that every American has a right to life, and that's part of the Constitution. Most medical decisions you're going to make, if not 99% of them, as a man or a woman, are not going to be violative of any of that. Abortion is different. So yes, let me answer the 99% question. Of course, I think you have the right to make whatever medical decision you want to make to help to preserve or enhance your health. Now, on abortion. I have always been one of the folks, I'm pro-life. I was raised a Catholic. I'm pro-life. I believe in that. I was always, as a public figure, in favor of exceptions for rape and incest and life of the mother, because I think those are acts of self-defense. And I think we've always acknowledged in the law that people have a right to defend themselves and take whatever action, including the taking of a life, to be able to defend themselves. But what I've also argued as a lawyer and a public figure is that abortion was not in the Constitution, and that it was a made-up part of the Constitution in 1973 in Roe versus Wade, and it didn't exist, and they just created it. And I've argued all along that what the Constitution says is that if a certain power is not directly mentioned here, it reverts to the states. And so what I believe is, and have believed for a long time, is that these decisions should be made by each individual state as to what the law is in their state. Dobbs' decision a year ago says that's the law. And now we're watching an experiment that's going on in each and every state about what they want. Their citizens in some states have voted on it by referendum. In some states, they're doing it with the legislature and the governor. But every state is now going through that process. And we're seeing the differences, right? In Oklahoma, they're saying no abortion at all unless the life of the mother is at risk. In my state, you can have an abortion up to the 9th month. And even after birth, if you started the abortion in the 9th month and the child did not die and needed to be delivered, you can finish the abortion outside the birth canal. I would say those are the two extremes, right? And what I favor is that each of the states now goes through that process. Keep the federal government out of it for now, and let's let each state decide. And let's see if the states form a national consensus on 20 weeks, 15 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it turns out to be. Then and only then should the federal government even consider trying to get involved in it. Otherwise, I think each individual state should make those judgments, like they do on every other issue that's not in the Constitution. And if they come to a national consensus on that, then maybe the federal government can do something, but only if you can get 60 votes in the Senate for any one particular limit. And I don't know that you're ever going to be able to do that, at least not in today's atmosphere. Maybe after the end of 2024, when you have all the states weigh in, we may look at it and say, okay, the average is 15 weeks, or it's 12 weeks, or it's 20 weeks. And then maybe we can come to a consensus on that. But I think we've argued as Republicans and conservatives for 50 years. The states should decide. And that's why I disagree with some of my party who now want a federal ban of some type. Now that Dobbs has been decided, the federal government shouldn't be doing this until the states get to weigh in. And we've been arguing that for 50 years. Now, all of a sudden, because we got Dobbs, we're going to change the rules? Not right. And so I believe each state should make a decision. I oppose what my state has right now. I think it's awful. But, you know, the state decided. And if it's so offensive to me or to my wife and we decide we can't live here under these circumstances, then we'll make a decision. But otherwise, I think each one of these states should make the decision. So that's the way I would answer the question. And I think that for people now who are picking a number of weeks out of the air, how about we let the American people decide what they want to do and see if we come to a consensus. And if we don't, then don't force one on them, because that's what Roe was. Roe forced 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, an artificial rule that they made up on the American people, and I think it caused a lot of division in this country for 50 years because of it. And also, one last thing, you may think you know what a state's going to do, but you never do. Here's Kansas, right? One of the reddest states in the country, Republican senators, I think one Democrat in the House delegation, and vote for the Republican president every time, and they put it up for a referendum to ban it, and it got defeated soundly, nearly 60% of the vote. So we don't always know what the people are going to do. I'd leave it to the people to decide it, not have the federal government interfere in a way that will cause, I think, even greater division. You're welcome. All right. No, it's not that I don't see it, it's that I see everybody, right? All right. You know what? Let's just do it. And then after this lady, I have one more. Because it's 8:15 and it's hot in here. And I want all of you to be able to go home. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, I'm another Democrat that's quite intrigued by you this
How
time.
about me, Mr. Intriguing?
Mr. Intriguing, yes. I just want to say that I am so glad that somebody has stood up in your party publicly all over against Trump and said what he has done, and just, I can't wait for that debate.
Yeah, neither can I.
Yeah, but another question I want to ask is, what is your take on Ukraine? I think President Zelensky is awesome. And for his country to have Russia go and kill their civilians and everything, how would everybody here like it if somebody marched in and just started killing people?
Yeah, we wouldn't like it much, I suspect.
Not at all.
Let me say this about Ukraine. This is a part of a fallacy that politicians are putting forward. They say, America first. Who isn't for America first in this room, right? Like McKeecher's not going to go, I'm for the Netherlands first. I'd go Belgium second. I'm America third. No, we're all for America first. The question is, how do you make America first? On what principles do we become first? And for people to say that we can't fix our cities and help defend a free country that's being invaded by an authoritarian dictator is just wrong. For Ron DeSantis to say this is a territorial dispute, let me tell you, everybody, what a territorial dispute is. Like when you get your property surveyed and the surveyor comes back and goes, bad news, your fence is 8 inches onto your neighbor's property. That's a territorial dispute. Running tanks and artillery and missiles into a free country to kill their people and take their land by force is not a territorial dispute. It is a war. And I absolutely believe that Americans, as a matter of principle, need to stand with Ukraine. Secondly, this is in our interests. This is a pay me now or pay me later moment. The Chinese are funding the Russians. This is a proxy war between the U.S. and the Chinese. They're funding the Russians. They're coordinating with the Iranians to give the Russians more sophisticated military hardware. And they are watching because of Taiwan. And if we back off from Ukraine, they are going to be in Taiwan faster than you're going to be able to blink your eye. And if you don't care about the freedom of the Taiwanese people, and you're America first and only, think about this. 2/3 of all the semiconductors in the world are manufactured in Taiwan. And if you want the Chinese in charge of every semiconductor chip, or 2/3 of them in this country, decide who gets them and who doesn't, I guarantee you we're going to be near the end of the line. And then you think buying your iPhone is going to be a problem. Wait till you try to do any function in this country anymore without the best semiconductors and a whole lot of them. So I absolutely believe that we have an obligation to do it and that it's in the American interest to do it. And I think the people who are saying to you, like Vivek and Trump and DeSantis, that somehow this isn't in our country's interest. And Trump says, I love this. He'll settle it in 24 hours, right? Same way Mexico paid for the wall. Same way he balanced the budget. Same way he repealed Obamacare. He'll settle, you know, if he does settle in 24 hours, you know the way he'll do it? By handing Zelensky over to the Russians. Because he said on TV just a week ago that Putin is a good guy. He said that President Xi is brilliant and straight out of Hollywood. Who is this guy? And look, these are serious issues, everybody. This is not a friggin' TV show. This is not in a fake boardroom in New York City, sitting across from some celebrity and saying you're fired. That's entertainment. This is our livelihoods. We've already seen the TV show for 4 years. You want it back? Because, look, that's what we're confronting. It's not about if you're against Trump, you're for Biden. I think I've proven tonight I'm not for Biden. And I'll take him out if I'm the nominee. But you'll have a presidency that you can be proud of again. Not one every week you're making another excuse for. Oh, well, he's a little bit erratic. Oh, well, he's irascible. Oh, well, he's got a bad temper. Oh, but I love his policies. I am tired of the people who say I love his policies, so I'll vote for him. That's not a good enough excuse. Because guess what? There's a whole bunch of other Republicans, myself included, who will do almost every one of those policies that he's done, except we'll actually do them. So for Ukraine, we've got to stand with them. We've got to let President Zelensky know that we are with him until the war is concluded. And it will be concluded on his terms. Now, you know, we're going to have a say in it too. We're going to say to him like, oh, all right, well, that looks like if I'm sitting there as president, and I think he's been offered a pretty good deal to get this thing over with and have his people stop dying on, I'll get on the phone and say to him, hey, I might take that deal if I were you. But they have a right to defend their land. They have a right to defend their people. And we should be helping them do it. And Joe Biden, by the way, is giving them just enough not to lose. I'd give them the F-16s, too.
They need the F-16.
They need the F-16s, and I would give them to them also. Because are we in this to win or aren't we? I think we should be in it to win, and for the Ukrainians to win. So last question will go. This lady in front has been waiting for me the entire time and keep thinking that I'm forgetting her, but I'm not. So Catherine's going to bring you the microphone.
Thank you.
Yeah, me too. But
Okay, this is a question that's happening today. What is your opinion of what Governor Abbott did to stop the people coming over the border, and now the DOJ is going to take them to court?
you mean the floating
Yes.
barriers? Look, I think whatever we need to do at this point, and I want to be careful about this, I don't think we should be killing people as they come over the border. I think one candidate has suggested that. I don't think we should be killing people, but I don't see, from what I know about the floating barriers, people are not drowning because of them, which is what DOJ is saying. Most people who drown in the Rio Grande is because they can't swim, not because of the floating barriers. And so I think whatever steps we need to take to secure that border is what we need to do, absent taking people's lives. There's razor wires in part of it too. Look, we need to have a border, right? I mean, so like, yeah, like I think what I hope is that when people confront razor wire, that they turn around, right? Don't go into it. It's sharp. It'll cut you up. Like, we're trying to tell you, please don't do this. Do it the right way. We need, well, I want more immigrants in this country. We have 8 million open jobs in this country right now that Americans either can't do or won't do. We need more people to help to build and grow our economy. We always have. But it has to be done legally. It has to be done fairly. There shouldn't be people waiting around online, waiting to come in here legally, and other people coming over the Rio Grande in illegally, and they get credited and the others get to stay out. So that's what I'm for, and I don't think that the DOJ is right on this, and I think it's continued pandering by the Biden administration, by the way, to a Hispanic vote that they continue to lose more of every cycle. Because guess what? Hispanic Americans want legal immigration also. They think it's wrong because most of them came over here legally. And they're like, well, what the hell, man? I waited, and I came over legally, and I gotta let them in illegally? You know, people who immigrate to this country take possession of our country pretty quickly, meaning they feel like Americans. We make them feel like Americans. We welcome them. This is a welcoming, loving country. And so, you know, my view on this is we need to have a border. And you don't have a country if you don't have a border. And we need to make sure we have one. And I think that what the Biden administration is doing right now, like the student loan thing, is just political pandering for votes. They know it's not right. They know they don't have the authority to do it, but they're gonna go to court and fight it. I think Abbott will ultimately win that fight. But in the meantime, you know, they're taking a tool away from him that they shouldn't take. So, before we all melt, let me do this. I know there's some questions I didn't answer. Here is the great news. I'll be back. All right? I'm not going anywhere. And I appreciate you all coming tonight. It really means a lot to me and to Mary Pat. You know, every time you show up at one of these town halls, you know, I always have two wishes. One, that there are plenty of people there, and two, that they're going to really ask me good questions. Because if they do, I usually give pretty good answers. It's the stupid questions that get me like a little flummoxed up. But you're all good questions here tonight. And look, this is still the greatest country in the world. There are still people every day who are lining up to get in here. If you go to almost any other place in the world, they would tell you if they had the chance to trade their passport for yours, they would do it in a heartbeat. I love this country, and I love the opportunities that it's given me. And I'm doing this now at this stage of my life because I don't want us to decline. We've already had, almost except for Quinn, all of us in this room have already had a great American life. We already have had it. And I think what we want to make sure is that he does. Is we don't want to be that last generation. You know, Reagan said, you know, freedom is always just one generation away from extinction. And he was right. This is not a given. But I want to be the president when we celebrate our 250th anniversary. That's only 3 years away. 3 years away, this country will be 250 years old. And it is a miracle, everybody. It's a miracle. It's never, ever happened before in the history of the world to have this diverse a people come together over 250 years and govern themselves and be a leader for the entire world. Let's not blow it. You know, I'm willing to do whatever it is I need to do that. The oath for the President of the United States says that you swear to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. Washington wrote the oath himself. Preserve, protect, and defend. I promise you that's what I'll do. The guy I'm running against said he is willing to suspend the Constitution if he thought it was unfair. How can we let him take that oath again when he has told us to our faces that if it's not in his self-interest, he will violate it? We can't do that. And I've heard all the reporters who've told me I can't win, and I've heard all the people who come up to me and ask me why I'm in this race, and I am telling you that I have faith in the people of this country, that in the end, what they're going to see is that the truth matters. It matters more than anything, and it's not negotiable. It can't just be the truth we like. And we have people now who the only truth they want to hear is the truth they like. So if you're conservative, you put on Fox or Newsmax and you don't watch anything else. And if you're a liberal, you put on MSNBC or CNN and you don't watch anything else because, God, you don't want to be made to be uncomfortable and actually hear the real truth from either side. The truth matters. I'm running because the truth matters. And all of you in New Hampshire, as you have done for 100 years, have the first chance to prove whether I'm right or wrong, to prove whether the truth matters to people in New Hampshire. Live free or die doesn't mean a damn thing if it's built on a lie. Live free or die is built on truth. That we will live free or die to protect the truth in this country. That's the core of it. And that's why I'm going to spend most of my time here. Because I know that all of you understand that and believe it. And if you do, then you cannot vote for someone who'd be willing to suspend the Constitution to put their own self-interest ahead of the interest of this country. And whatever you want to call what it is, to be able to do that and stand across from him and do it, I like what you called it. But whatever you want to call it, I have it. I'm doing it. And I'm going to do it right up until the time that I leave the White House in 2032. And it's all going to start right here. Thank you.